witnesses, and we'll be able to ask informed questions on that basis. So we'll proceed directly to questioning, and I will open up before offering the call to my colleagues. Ms Joske, your submission to the inquiry is in some ways the most sobering submission that we've received, because your research, relying on open source materials, has identified 325 participants in talent recruitment programs of the Chinese Communist Party, both the 1,000 Talents program and, as you've identified, also the subnational recruitment programs that exist within China. But as you identify in your submission, probably even your research only scratches the surface that these are very opaque programs historically, and they've become even more so recently, and there may in fact be many more Australian researchers who participated in that we don't know about, even due to your research, which brought new ones to light. Unpack that a little bit for us. Why has it been so hard to identify? Why is it becoming increasingly opaque, and why should we be concerned about that?
Thank you. I think I'd first point out that since I wrote the submission, I've identified 5 more participants in these talent recruitment programs. So again, that just speaks to the fact that the research I put in the submission is really just scratching the surface. And I've estimated that there are probably at least 500 or 600 people from Australian institutions who've joined these talent recruitment programs in total, if not many more. And that's out of 60,000 who've been recruited across the world. It's important to point out that the opacity, the misconduct, the lack of transparency is actually built into these programs. There are systematic problems that come with them. These programs really can't be compared to talent recruitment efforts by the Australian government, for example, with the Global Talent Visa Program. To give a couple of examples, the very agencies that oversee China's talent recruitment efforts have themselves been implicated in espionage. There have been cases of the Ministry of State Security, which is the Chinese government's foreign intelligence agency, recruiting people through the 1,000 Talents plan and tasking them to steal technology. That happened in a case in the US where an engineer was tasked to steal gas turbine jet engine trade secrets from a US defense contractor. And then at the same time, the extent of misconduct really does seem widespread. That's not to say that there aren't people who join the 1,000 Talents plan, for example, and are fully transparent about their participation or are quitting their jobs in Australia to move to China, which I think is just a normal part of recruitment. And you know, we shouldn't criminalise those sorts of behaviours. But there's a case at the Texas A&M University system in the US, for example, where they looked at 100 of their staff members who'd in some way been affiliated with talent recruitment programs, and they found that just 5 of them had actually declared that. And similar figures can be pulled out from the research that I've done. So one of the best indicators of that in what I've looked at is the number of people receiving some of these Australian Research Council fellowships while also being members of talent recruitment programs. These fellowships come with restrictions on external appointments. They often come with requirements to work full-time on these projects in Australia and to get approval for any of these conflicts of interest and at the very least disclose them. And it's pretty clear that joining a talent recruitment program, assigning inventions to institutions in China through those talent recruitment programs, setting up companies that commercialise the very same technologies that these people are being paid by the Australian government to work on, these things would should all get in the way of these people receiving Australian Research Council fellowships. And the fact that this has nonetheless happened indicates that they haven't actually disclosed these activities fully.
And your research in this area, both your submission to this inquiry and previous papers that you've done, but also reporting by other journalists in this area, I'm thinking, for example, Shari Markson at The Australian, when this has become public, some universities have reacted with surprise and said, we didn't know that some of our researchers were engaged in this program. And universities and their representatives have said in their defence, you know, we're very large organisations, we have lots of staff, it's really hard to keep track of it. I guess, how much store do you put in that excuse by the university sector, given that, you know, you're currently an independent researcher, you were previously at a small think tank, and you've been able to identify this? Why can't these billion-dollar institutions identify this themselves?
It is difficult research to do. And here in Australia, even though we've only just started looking at the problem, we're still miles ahead of some other countries that haven't even had a debate at the national level or any sort of media coverage of talent recruitment programs. And it was even in the United States, which has led on this issue of talent recruitment and economic espionage. I think it's only about 2 years ago that they really started to build up a consolidated response to this problem. But that being said, universities do have existing policies and practices designed to pick up these sorts of activities. They have conflict of interest policies. They have policies on external employment. And on top of that, researchers receiving grant funding will have additional responsibilities to disclose those conflicts. So the question is, why aren't those existing processes working? And I think it's a mix of those processes not being sufficient, universities not actually pursuing these problems fully, not having the investigative capacity to actually get to the bottom of things, and also a problem of culture, where these practices have people been turning a blind eye to them. In some cases, US cases, you can see, for example, the very people supposed to regulate or be the final arbiter on whether someone's been complying with these conflict of interest policies has themselves been a participant in a talent recruitment program. So you're getting a deep cultural issue that is compounded by a lack of resourcing in investigative capabilities.
And what do you say? I mean, as you point out, this is a violation of existing university policies. Universities should be concerned, regardless of whether it was a foreign interference issue or not, that conflict of interest and research integrity and ARC grant conditions may not being met. But when fighting their inclusion in the Foreign Relations Bill, which is supported through the Parliament on a bipartisan basis, universities said, international research cooperation is so important and we really don't want to kill the golden goose in pursuit of that. What do you say to those arguments? Is it too hard for universities to both continue to maintain strong research international cooperation and also protect their own integrity as academic institutions?
So this inquiry is focused on national security, and talent recruitment programs do raise serious national security issues. But I think at a more fundamental level, the problem with talent recruitment programs is how they break down and take advantage of the fundamental trust and integrity that science relies on, the ability to be assured that researchers are actually disclosing their conflicts of interest when they're doing research, and not lying about the way they're doing research, who's funding their research, any of those interests that could complicate things. So I think that universities really should see a very strong self-interest in dealing with these problems, and I think it's something that will actually strengthen their engagement with China. I think more and more of them are recognising this. It's starting to happen through groups like UFIT, but there's a long way to go. This is really complementary to engagement with China. I think a lot of the past problems with engagement with China, collaboration with the Chinese military, even weapons of mass destruction collaboration with China, and widespread misconduct associated with talent recruitment programs, to give a couple of examples. These are all things that shouldn't be happening if we're approaching engagement with China from a position of, strong information, of awareness, of having a strong understanding of our partners in China, and good management of conflicts of interest and risk.
Thank you. I'll offer the